good afternoon. Welcome to our weekly Meet the Atheists segment. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a face that everybody already knows, Jim Barrows from the ACA. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm doing really, really wonderful on this mighty fine Sunday afternoon. Well, Sunday afternoon for me, and Sunday, whatever it is, wherever you happen to be.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much towards the end of the evening here for us. It's just over 9 p.m. But yeah, you know, it's very interesting to meet atheists from all over the world. And ever since we started this project of interviewing atheists, you know, you can go to any country that you want to. They're everywhere. There's people who are not buying the bullshit anymore.
Yeah. I'm in the deep South. I'm in Alabama, South Alabama, about 2 hours north of the Gulf, and there's 3 churches within spitting distance. I don't live in a big town. I live in a little town called Slocum, Alabama, and the nearest big town is Dothan, which is another one nobody's ever heard of because it's not that big either, but it's a fair size. There's one other YouTuber that's on here, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I need to make it a point to contact him. And there's an atheist group down here. So even in the heart of the Bible Belt, there are atheists, which is why doing this show is so important, is to let other atheists know they're not alone.
And this is the mission of our organization as well, is to build those communities of people. I'm sorry, I have to highlight this. Somebody said we must take Elon back to South Africa. It's fine. You can have him.
I would like to agree with that, but I wouldn't wish Elon Musk on anybody. So.
No, it's crazy. It's crazy. So, Jim, let's dive right in and tell us a little bit about your background. Did you grow up in a religion? What was that like? Where you are from?
Yeah, so I'm a recovering Catholic. I'm also a U.S. Air Force brat. I'll try to remember to put country names on stuff, so this isn't international, but you could assume if I just say Air Force that it's U.S. But so my dad was in the Air Force, so we moved 14 times in 17 years before we stopped counting as a family, and I've moved quite a few more times than they have at this point. So moving around, we saw, we were Catholic. First order of business was, after finding a house, when my dad got orders, was to find a church. And, in some cases, we went to 2 or 3 before we found a Catholic church that we liked, and my sister and I got along with the kids and stuff like that, and the nuns. Being an Air Force brat, when we moved to Omaha, Nebraska, there was a Catholic church that was very anti-military, and so we didn't stay too long there before we moved to another larger church, Catholic church there. So that was always the first order of business. The second order of business was to get my sister and I on the waiting list to go to school at a Catholic school. And until then, we went to public school. So I got a mix of education, not just from moving around, but also from going from public to private, back to public again. And then also, just if we weren't going to a Catholic school, we were going to CCD, which is the Evening Catholic Studies group or classes we take. So, I wouldn't say we were as heavily religious as some atheists that I know. But we went to church every Sunday. We went to midnight mass on Christmas. We went to the first service on Easter. We did all the classes. We went to, we were in Catholic school. So my sister and I are fairly well indoctrinated into it. And, that's kind of the way that my mom was raised as well. She came from German and Irish parents, and, both those cultures are strongly Catholic. So it wasn't, Bible beating by, parents or strictness, but it was still very deeply Catholic.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So it's basically conformity with a heavy dose of guilt.
yeah, we did the kneel, sit, stand routine every Sunday. I was even an altar boy for a number of years. And I did that more out of boredom because as an altar boy, you got to do more stuff. And so you're moving and doing things during the service, which I liked. I didn't, I was never really super strong in my faith. And then when I was in my mid 20s, late 30s, I don't really remember when that was, somewhere in there. I decided that I wanted to learn more about Catholicism. I started to get into Catholic apologetics. And that's when I began to look at some of the arguments and realize just how bad they were, realize just how much of history has got to be whitewashed in order to think that the Catholic Church was a major force for good. Now, saying that the Catholic Church today is a huge, sprawling organization, and there are parts of it that do good, there are parts of it that don't. And so to say that with the kind of absolutism is I think foolish. And I think, even in the third, fourth, fifth centuries, you could probably say the same thing, that it was a looser coalition. We have to remember that communication was an instant. Communication would take weeks or months between cities. And so communities were much more isolated than we are today. Right. I mean, obviously, we're not isolated. You're in South Africa. I'm in the United States. And here we are talking. That would never be possible, right, through much of the history of Christianity. So, yeah, you look at early Rome. Rome had to pass 2 laws making it punishable by death to worship anybody but God. You've got the Spanish Inquisition, the conquistadors, the spreading of the faith through fire and sword more than the quality of their violence rather than the quality of the arguments. So you can make all these things.
It's so well said.
Yeah, but the Catholic Church also preserved in the monasteries education. There a lot of science came out of the Catholic Church. And yes, the Catholic Church did punish stuff they didn't like. But sometimes those stories are more complicated than they seem. But it's a mix and mash of things when you look at it. But I just started to realize that if there was a God, and the God it was the head of the church in inspiring the priests and the popes the way we had been taught, that this was an awfully fucked up way to do it. There should be no need for the Spanish Inquisition. Not only should there be no need for it, there should be no way for it to be allowed. There should be no way for the conquistadors to convert by fire and sword. There's just no need for any of that. And if you have facts on your side, then those win out almost every time. And so that started kind of the decline. I started to get more and more into my field, which is computer science, and learning how people can actually do better at estimating. Because estimating projects and estimating tasks in computer science and computer engineering is a problem. We don't do it very well. And there are huge reasons why, the way that our minds are constructed, we don't deal well with numbers. So there's a really good book called The Myth of Fair Value and How to Exploit It. Because we don't understand value very well. There's 10,000 hours or so of videotaped evidence in a U.S. game show called The Price is Right, where the contestants attempt to guess the price of things. And at the time I read the book, they pointed out that in almost 20 years at that point of the show being on, with the exception of cars, houses, and trips, they hadn't changed the value of the goods or the goods themselves. They were the same brands and same prices.
Right.
And people weren't doing a good job of guessing it. In fact, the only 2 people to have really guessed everything had memorized the prices because they recognized that
The
the
system
things
is
never
rigged.
changed.
Yeah.
Well, it's not so much rigged; it's people watch it, but they don't pay attention, right?
Yeah. And I
To the
also
fact
think there's
that
a bit of, there must be a bit of bias involved as well, where we are a bit too confident in our ability to assess, these
yes,
things like the value of something. And we, because we have a lived experience of paying for stuff on a daily basis, we consider ourselves experts at guessing the value of things. And then
right.
where the tire hits the road, it's a different story.
It is. And so looking at these cognitive biases that we have, and cognitive biases are different than fallacies, right? Cognitive biases are deal with the way that we think, that we're pattern matching creatures. So it's the way we're wired, as opposed to fallacies, which is how we think about a client. And they both come into play. So when you start looking at all that, you realize that there is just no way for us to be as rational as we think. You read a book like Freakonomics, which talks about how irrational sometimes our behaviors are, even from an economist point of view, and the fact that the idea of a rational actor in economics doesn't really exist. Starts you thinking that maybe all this stuff is not true, that there are problems with a all good, all powerful God creating us as the perfect being, right? The evidence is just not there for those claims, and so that started me down the road.
The funny thing is, Jim, is when you tell a child these stories, you can see that they're having a hard time swallowing it.
Right, exactly. In many cases,
yeah, it takes repetition, and you've got to take them to the church, and they've got to see all the people there. But if you just take a child with no experience of religion and you tell them these stories, you can see something is not right.
And we're social creatures, and we want to go with the group, right? We want to go with the tribe, because for the most part, we don't want to stand out. And so, in many cases, that is the case. And then you start getting to people who have these personal experiences, and their experiences that get interpreted as a personal experience with something supernatural, even though it may or may not be. So, there's lots of reinforcement that happens. And if you really want to see reinforcement, go to an older Catholic church, like one built in the 1718, early 1900s,
Right.
and look at how much visual reinforcement there is. And remember, a lot of that is coming from a time, a lot of the imagery in the Catholic Church comes from a time when that reading wasn't fundamental. You didn't go to school to read. Reading was a pretty rare skill. It's a lot of it is very, very visual. The design of the churches, the church towers, and the impressive buildings and the gargoyles, and the way that the halls everything is constructed in a way to reinforce the beliefs. Whether that's intentional or accidental, we could argue about that for days. It doesn't really matter, because that is the effect, right, of what's happening. So
it's a brainwashing laundromat. That's what it is.
Well, all education systems are, right. It's what you focus on that we want to do. If we want to build critical thinking skills, then we have to build that from an early age. We have to. And there's a really good book by David Kahneman, who's a psychologist and researcher, that talks about system 1 and system 2 thinking. System 1 thinking is low energy pattern recognition. So for instance, if I say 1 + 1 and you say 2, you're not doing the math in your head, right? That's a pattern you have recognized, and that's why you can spit it out so quickly. If I ask you what the square root of 3,456 is, now you've got to do the math, and you've got to think about it. That system 2 thinking is a lot more energy intensive, takes a lot more work to do, and so we don't do it as well as we might like. Now, these two models are definitely fall into that camp of all models are wrong and some models are useful. You're not going to go into the brain and go, this section of the brain is model 1 or system 1 and this is system 2. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Just two ways of thinking about how we think. And so critical thinking is one of those things that takes a lot of energy and a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so we it's a skill that we can improve, and we don't often do that.
I think at the end of the day, you know, we evolved to be lazy. We evolved to be
low
lazy,
energy,
you know, to conserve energy, to use, you know, to get the maximum output out of our resources with minimum effort. And we've evolved into that, you know, so it makes complete sense that something that is energy intensive on your body, you know, like that burns your energy to do, like thinking, you know, that would be the second thing. So the most instinctual thing that we will aim towards is something that comes naturally, that almost like comes from the primal brain. It's just reactive. It's not something that you have to put a lot of effort into. And that's where religion plays very easily into the system, because if you can imprint and indoctrinate a young mind into reactive thinking, you know, like when they see the cross, immediately they think, oh my God, you know, let me save 10 Hail Marys quickly, you know.
Exactly.
It's just the path of least resistance, you know. But you know, what was the straw that broke the camel's back for you? You know, like I can very clearly remember the point in my life where I just say, like, fuck it, I don't believe this bullshit anymore. But it wasn't like an aha moment, you know. It was a gradual process of, it's like that story of the bird that goes to chip on the statue every day, and then after a few years, then, you know, the statue is gone. But there was a distinct moment where I recognized, and I just said, like, fuck it, I'm out. I don't believe this shit anymore. What was that journey like for you, Jim?
That was basically what it was. It's just one day I kind of went, yeah, I'm an atheist. And I was like, well, I want to hang out with other atheists. I need to improve my social group more on stuff that made more sense. And so I was in Phoenix at the time, and I found the Humanist Society for Greater Phoenix. Great group. And started watching the Atheist Experience myself. But yeah, that's why I say I wandered out of Catholicism. There was not an aha moment for me either.
So there
was no crisis for me. There's no crisis of faith for me,
Yeah.
Which is why I also kind of stress that I don't think that I was a real strong believer ever. I was a believer, but I wasn't carrying a Bible around with me, although I read it as a kid, and I read it as an adult as well. So for me, yeah, and I know a lot of my friends in the atheist community have these gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching moments before they do it, and I never had that, and for whatever it's worth, right? And it doesn't have to be. I don't think it doesn't. It just you just literally wake up one day and go, yeah, I don't really accept that as true.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. There seems to be these, you know, from my experience speaking to atheists, seems to be two different camps. There are people who, I guess, at the end of the day, it boils down to how much you internalize the belief. You know, if the beliefs become the focal point of your existence, the second you break free, it's a very profound cathartic experience. Where, on the other hand, if it just happens to be something that you do out of habit, maybe as a societal construct, when you leave it, it's most probably a different experience. But the funny thing is, I've done a couple of these interviews already, and the thing is, no two people's story is alike. You know, sure, they have similar themes in them, you know, but everybody has such a different experience with this, you know, letting go of religion. It's fascinating. It really is fascinating. But you know, was there? You said, was it a complete inside job, or was there a person or an organization that fueled you to think?
It was an inside job. I didn't start joining organizations, atheist organizations, until after I had realized I was an atheist, and that was what the term was, and I mean, I kind of knew what it was, but I hadn't actually applied it as a label to anything until, like I said, my late 20s, early 30s, somewhere in there.
Right.
And then, I was in Phoenix. I got a chance to sell my home because I bought it at the complete wrong time. It was upside down for a really long time, and decided I wanted to move out of Phoenix and move someplace better that had a higher happiness index. Austin was one of those, and of course, I'd been watching Atheist Experience at that point. So, and I'd lived in Austin before and really enjoyed living there. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me to move to Austin. And then, at the time, you had to be in Austin to be on the show.
Right.
And so the Atheist, the ACA is an actual organization where some members don't even know we do the shows. It's a larger organization.
Right.
I met members. So on Sundays, there's a whole group of people that'll show up they used to show up at the library, and we'd watch the show and kibitz and have some community bonding time there. But there were other things that were being done around Austin on other days, and some people only thought that's what the ACA was doing that event. So nobody in the ACA was doing a good job of bringing the disparate Austin community together into one thing. But so yeah, some of those folks didn't know we did the shows. They didn't know we had a library. It was just kind of an interesting experience as I went to all these different things, because I had just moved back to Austin. I had just a few friends from my college days there, and trying to build a social network. And then one day, it was a Saturday, I was just hanging out. They were doing nonprofits. They were down a host. And I said, "Hey, could I do it?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
Very fortuitous.
So, yeah. Now it's a whole different story, right?
Yeah. The thing is that this is the one thing that religion does very well, is it builds community. It builds community around a shared purpose, shared rituals, shared values. And the thing is, this is something that the atheist movement can really learn from religion. That's about the only good thing, if you ask me. But and it's also it's very difficult to build that community, which is why I commend you guys for the success that you've had in doing that, because we here in South Africa, we've been struggling to just to mobilize and activate people, and it's something that I have set my New Year's resolution to a monthly meeting, be it online, in person, whatever. Whoever comes. If I have to sit there with my other co-hosts just talking about shit the whole hour, then we do that. But that's a commitment. And I want to see just how we can activate people, because in my experience, religion takes your silence as acquiescence. They, if you don't speak up and speak out, they will run roughshod over you. It's crazy how that works.
Yeah, and the thing too is, it's hard to build that community, right? You need to show up at the same place at the same time every week, every month, whatever it is. And if it's every month, it's going to take longer. Every week will take not nearly as long. But when I say not nearly as long, doing this every week, it could take 6 to 9 months a year before you get one more person, right?
Yeah.
And it'd be another 6 months before you get 2 more people. And so that consistency is really, really important. If you do it once a month, it's harder, right? Because people have to build that community gathering into their habits, right? Into what they do, into their weekly things. And that can be hard to do for folks. So doing the marketing, which is no better way to put it, put the word out, marketing, consistency, and then do it for a really long time. And that's when you're going to find that you'll have the success with it that you want. But it's not hard. It's not easy to do.
Yeah. So what are you passionate about, Jim? A lot of people, when they leave religion, they don't become Greenpeace warriors who chain themselves to corporate buildings, but you find that it generally sparks a different interest in people. I remember when when I deconverted, I was, completely shocked with, all the different injustices. And, I just wanted to go and like go and shake everybody grab them by either by the shoulder or by the neck.
Yeah. No, I was an avid board gamer. There was a board gaming group that I was part of in Phoenix. I started doing that in Austin as well. I got into the idea of sailing around the world. That sounded like really a lot of fun, low cost way to see a whole lot of places. Learned how to sail, I ended up buying 2 boats, almost at the same time, but, and then, met my girlfriend and we started to travel via RV, sold the boats, travel via RV. I'm still passionate about travel. I still want to do that. But we're also both now scuba divers. We moved where we are simply because of the scuba diving. So we dive freshwater in caves, as well as saltwater, and lots of wreck diving in Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. If we're going to change the name, let's change it to Gulp of Rum. But other than that, we shouldn't really change the name. If we're going to do it, let's do it silly, right?
I do not envy you the next 4 years. I really do not. It's like, like we're sitting on the outside looking in sometimes, and we thinking, this is a fucking clown show. It's
more so than it usually is, right? I mean, usually our infighting is entertaining and silly, but this has gone well into dangerous territory.
This is some next level shit. This is crazy.
We have 2 presidents who are fundamentally ignorant of how any of this shit works.
Yeah.
And what the mistakes they're making are clear indications of that. When you fire everybody who is in charge of keeping track of our nuclear stockpiles, considering how many of those we have and how much of that at weapons grade we actually have, you're completely ignorant of how everything works. And remember, I'm a U.S. Air Force brat. My dad flew B-52s. He was part of the nuclear weapon apparatus that we had. So I am really hyper aware of stuff like that. And that he could do that and not realize it is completely flabbergasted to me. I don't understand how you could even come close to not knowing what those people do on something that important, right? So,
but Jim, this is the thing. The rational mind from the outside looks at this, and it only indicates a symptom of a system. There's something wrong with the system if this is the results that it yields. And I mean, this is just my opinion. I have absolutely no education in politics or governance or any kind of systems like that. But to me, it just looks like it's symptomatic of a system that needs an overhaul. Something is not working correctly. So if you look at it from a systems analysis and design perspective, the output is not what you desire. So there's something that needs to be tweaked in the system.
Yeah, well, there are, we have a number of those systems problems. Almost all of our voting is first past the post type of voting. So whoever gets the most wins. And then we do things like gerrymander and create districts where we try to create voting blocks that are equal. And in Texas is not a blue state, or is not a red state. It's a blue state. The problem is when you look at how they district these things, they district them to be red, so that the majority Democrat voters are the minority in every district. And so we really need to move to ranked choice voting. We need to get rid, and I do not advocate for getting rid of the Electoral College altogether. I do recommend getting rid of it in favor of ranked choice voting for president. That will work out much better.
Or how about the people who become the candidates at the end of the day, who stand up for election, there needs to be like some, at least some qualification. There needs to be like a checklist, like, have you been in government, have you done this, have you done, just to make sure that you qualified, because you're dealing with some high level stuff there. You're dealing with project management, you're dealing with diplomacy, like there's such a diverse skill set that's required of someone in that position, that I would at least think that there would be a checklist or something. But it looks like any Tom, Dick, and Harry can go stand on a soapbox and say, vote for me, and he's in.
Well, that's actually kind of a feature in some ways, that anybody can't do it. It's supposed to be a feature. But what actually ends up happening, because it's first past the post, you always end up with two parties. Mathematically, that's just the way it's going to work. And so, for instance, I didn't vote for Biden. I voted against Trump. My parents, on the first time Trump was ran, didn't vote for him. They voted against Hillary. And so you have these tactical choices where people aren't voting for who they want. They're voting against the person they don't want.
So
and that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And when Kamala started running, I was voting for Kamala, not against Trump. So it was less tactical at that point, right? I think that's a technical term, is a tactical vote, when you're voting for somebody because it's not the other person to keep the other person from getting into power. And so when you move to ranked choice, you end up with more candidates. And so the least qualified candidates become more apparent. Also, I think one of the things that happens is Trump was very, very good at things people recognized as things they wanted, at saying those things, right? That's why he's a populist candidate. And they weren't actually listening to everything else going on around it, because people get busy, right? So yes, you're correct. There's some systemic things we can fix, right? But there's also humanity, which we're not going to fix anytime soon, where people want to go to their jobs. They've got families. And so if the candidate is making the right noises out of his mouth, they recognize that as somebody they like and they want to vote for. They don't necessarily do the deep dive into who this person is.
I'm just reflecting on our political system here. I mean, like, our ballot is like literally it's a page that's like this long, that many different choices, so
right.
you really have to in order to be an informed voter, you have to invest a serious amount of time to go through everybody's message, and few people do that, so in a certain sense, I look at a two-party system where it's a binary vote between the two. It might be easier to get that, but what it does in essence is it polarizes. It also has the side effect of polarizing sentiments within a country, and then what I find especially telling, and I mean, like, this is not from first-hand experience. I obviously get my opinion from consuming media that comes across from there. But the religious right in the States have got very, very long fingers that are dug very, very deep into the systems of government. And this is very ironic, because there is supposed to be a clear separation between your government and your religion, which is it's almost like that brother that everybody has in prison, that everybody knows about but nobody talks about.
Right. And the extreme religious conservatives have gotten into power by hiding where they come from, and that's a problem. They've gotten into the school boards. They've gotten into the state legislature. So they've done a lot of local stuff. And when you start making those changes locally, it becomes easier to convince people to make those changes at the national scale. And that's problematic. And that's where you get, like, the Republicans in Tennessee making it a crime to disagree with Trump. That's where you get to people in Ohio who just passed legislation that basically anybody can make a claim against a girl in sports that she's not actually a girl. Anybody can make that claim and make that charge. And now, instead of being innocent until proven guilty, they're guilty until proven innocent, because now they have to prove they are in fact a cis girl. And the way they have to do that, the doctor has got to do a very invasive, and we're talking 10-year-olds, as young as 10 girls, who now have to go into a gynecologist and have their clitoris measured, and if it's of an abnormal size, get disqualified. Now, there's no definition, there's no medical definition for abnormal size. I mean, what the hell does that mean? Nobody knows.
Yeah. It's so extreme, it's so extreme, the polarizing effect that it has. It's crazy. It really is crazy. And that,
I mean, I'm less than 1% of the population. We're talking literally less than 1% of the entire population of the planet, much less the entire 1% of the population of Ohio. So you're not talking about large numbers here. And they're treating it like an existential threat to Ohio, and it's not an existential threat, right? It's less than 1%. That are folks who are trans. So all this stuff is nonsense. And then when they try to enforce it because they only have at best a high school education in biology, right? They think what they're doing will work. And it's like, well, no, you don't really understand what the range of the values are for any part of the human body, right? There are outliers. They don't understand that sex is bimodal distribution. It's not a binary distribution, right? It's a spectrum between male and female. It's not just male and female.
So that touches a little bit on what what I like to highlight. If I don't highlight this in every single stream, I've failed my mission as a host, and that is to talk about the harm and the negative aspects of religion. And those happens on so many different levels. We talk about it on the psychological level, how it traumatizes people's psyche. We talk about it in the societal level, how it forces people to have in groups and out groups and exclude some people, and then it spills over to even to the scale of your country and even on the globe. I mean, look at the impact that radical religions in the Middle East is having on the movements of people, on people's safety, and all of that. For me personally, the biggest thing that I felt traumatized, about with religion, it was always just fire and brimstone, and living in constant fear and just being scared, what if I do something wrong or take a wrong step? I felt like I was constantly I had the surveillance camera floating above my head. What were some of the negative impacts that that religion had on you growing up and currently?
I'm still very susceptible to guilt and fear as motivators, which is, and I've been working on it. I don't feel as guilty for stuff unless I still screw up, right? And I own those screw ups, but I don't feel guilty about it because I recognize that is part of who I am. I have attention deficit disorder. The thing that drives my girlfriend crazy is she will attempt to talk to me and I don't hear her. And this isn't the boyfriend ignoring. I'm not ignoring her. I literally don't hear her because I hyper focus on stuff to the point where I am not listening or paying attention to anything but whatever it is I'm hyper focused on, whether that's reading, watching TV, playing a game. If I'm hyper focused on it, I'm not listening to much else. So, that's part of who I am. Do I feel guilty about it? Not as much as I used to, because I just started to accept that, we both accept this is part of who I am. There's literally nothing I can really do about it. Because it's the way I am wired in my head. And so I have to work around those things. So, when I walk out of the house and get halfway somewhere and forget the very things we needed, I don't feel guilty about that. I know that's going to happen. Now I have systems in place. I try to put systems in place to prevent all that from happening because I know it will happen, right? So, but I don't feel guilty when
Yeah,
it
it
does.
happens to me too.
Yeah.
Like I think it's the older you get, the easier it is to forget. I
Well,
don't know.
yeah. There's also a scale, right? There's the number of
Yeah,
times I do it, and I will do that dozens and dozens of times per day. Now, most of um, but it's like I said, it's something I recognize where I can. I put systems in place to
yeah,
mitigate the ADHD negatives, but I don't feel guilty for
yeah,
screwing it up, and other things too. Just being normal human, we know we're going to screw up. We know we're going to make decisions that aren't rational, that they are more emotional based because we can't make decisions without emotions. So that becomes, part of accepting who you are. So it's still a work in progress. But yeah, guilt and fear are two things that Christianity uses in abundance. And the thing I like to sometimes point out is if you worked for a boss who guilted you and tried to instill fear in you the way the Bible and God does, you would consider that to be a very bad boss. So why is God doing that? Because the worst two ways, if you think of it as kind of a square where you've got immediate and delayed, and then reward and punishment. Immediate reward is a stronger motivation for human behavior than delayed punishment. And yet, the only thing God does is delayed punishment, right? Um, if we all look at what, going back to what Elon Musk is doing, firing everybody for maybe, let's give him the benefit of the doubt here, just for this example, for one or two people doing something bad. That's not a good thing. And yet, Christians accept that God will send a hurricane to punish less than 1% of the population.
yeah, yeah,
That's also wrong. So if you think that, if we accept for a moment that what Elon is, that Musk has actually found one person who's committing fraud and fires the entire department, if you think that scenario is wrong, then you also have to think that sending a hurricane to punish an entire town, city, state, whatever,
yeah,
for one or two or three or five people, 1% of that, less than 1% of that population, then you also have to think that is wrong. And it doesn't matter if God's doing it, right? Wrong is wrong, and right is right,
yeah.
which is a problem. It's one of the things that I had, because that's not a benevolent God. That's not an omnibenevolent God.
It's not a just system. It's again, you can put this to a 5-year-old and they'll tell you something's wrong here.
Right.
Something's wrong with the system here. This is not fair.
Now, as a scuba diver, one of the things that I started getting into is just culture, um, and the human factors in diving. And there's human factors in everything, right? And a lot of this research comes out of uh, our study of nuclear power plants, flying, nursing, all these high risk endeavors, and then how do we make it so that humans aren't making mistakes in these high risk endeavors?
Yeah.
Shoot, I forgot where I was going with that. Oh yeah, one of the things that they talk about in just culture terms is the difference between a punitive justice system and a restorative justice system.
That's the
And so the
thing.
question that they kind of ask on this is, what's better for society? Somebody steals from a store and then goes to jail, or somebody steals from the store and returns the money and repairs whatever damage was done. Which of those two things is better in the long run for society? Restorative justice is better. Punishment doesn't always work, and we know that because of the high recidivism rate. right?
Yeah,
And so it's much better, like I said, delayed punishment, which is what our justice systems are usually based on, as opposed to immediate reward, right? Or immediate punishment, is still better, but an immediate reward, right? Reward the behavior that we want to see and encourage the behavior we want to see. So while crime is a multifaceted and complex thing to look at, one of the influences is poverty. People who don't know where the next meal is from. People who feel ostracized from society. These are all things we can fix.
yeah,
We can fix a lot of the issues of this stuff if we stop being punitive, looked at restorative and preventative, because that's the best thing to do. And this is another problem that Christians have with their thinking, because according to most Christians, God gives you over to a reprobate mind. And so there's nothing we can do.
yeah. I think it was Hitchens who said in one of the lines of his speeches, I remember this, it will stay with me until the day I die, where he said something, what, born sick and commanded to be well, or something along those lines.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you tell somebody they're a sinner, you tell them they're an awful person enough, and they will come to believe it.
Yeah,
You know, you tell a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. And again, we know that to be true as well, right? So
first experience of that.
yeah, exactly. So again, where does any of this make sense from a Christian omni-God perspective? It doesn't make any sense to me. When you start looking at all of these things, is how does this God even come close to understanding humanity to be omnibenevolent if he's getting all this stuff so wrong and we're figuring it out, right? We're figuring out that all that stuff is wrong.
Yeah. What was the fallout zone like? When you finally decided to go public with your atheism, because I mean, there's no way that being on the YouTube channels and all of that, there's no way that you can basically keep that in the closet. So I'm sure that all your family and friends and everybody else knows. Like what was that process like for you? Did
Some of my family has found me on YouTube. Not my immediate family. My parents have not. My sister did, but she was already on her way out. I don't know. She waffles a little bit last time I talked to her. But my parents, as far as I know, don't know. At least neither one of us have brought it up. So I'm not out to my parents, and I don't really care one way or the other. I don't talk to them much anymore since they voted for Trump a second time. I yeah. But so I'm not technically out to them. They're also not. They don't watch a lot of YouTube. They don't consume a lot of social media. So it's entirely possible they just don't know. My various cousins, it depends on how much YouTube they consume. I know at least one cousin made a joke about the last time we were together, because we were actually together at a Catholic church for a funeral, a family funeral.
And they say, "Hey Jim, you're gonna spontaneously combust. Don't walk into
something along those lines." And I said, "Well, yeah, but well, this is not the time or the place, right? We're there for." And this is the other thing too is, you got to pick your battles, and there's a time and a place to start the debate, and a time and a place to just let it go. And being at a funeral for a member of the family, it's not the time and the place to have any sort of conversation on religion. Now, yes, I agree. Most Christians don't agree with that, right? That's the time and the place to talk about religion. But that's okay too, right? It's not the time and the place to have that debate. It's a time and the place to help people mourn, to help people and yourself, right? Not just other people, but yourself to mourn the passing. But yeah, and I think sometimes atheists forget that. And I know we all know Christians do, right? So, but we don't need to be like them.
My strategy was because I had such fear about broaching this subject, because I live my life as an open book, like I'm not the type of person, like when I'm with my family, I include them in, every aspect of my life, and I did mention this, like, and afterwards I said to him, look, I don't believe this anymore. But my relationship with you is more important to me than this issue is. So it's up to you to decide now what's more important to you. Because I'm prepared to. I'm. This is who I am. What you see is what you get. I'm not going to participate in these rituals anymore. I'm not going to go to any church services that you have planned because I don't believe that anymore. But my relationship with you as my family is more important to me than this one particular issue. So, like I said, like I mentioned earlier, that brother who's in prison, or the cousin that's in prison, everybody knows about him. Nobody talks about him around the dinner table anymore. So, I mean, at first it was, like you still kept on getting those passive aggressive Bible verses that get WhatsApp to you every now and then.
Right.
And after a while, I just said, like, I'm seriously going to block your account if you send me another Bible verse. I'm not interested, But I understand as well. It's coming from a place. It's coming from a good place. They're not bad people. They're not maliciously trying to antagonize me. They do this because they deeply care about me, and they are convinced that I'm going to be burning in hell, sucking Satan's balls until the end of time.
Yeah, nobody is the villain in their own movie, right? In their head, and they are doing what they believe is right. The fact that their belief is false, or we don't accept it as true, doesn't really change anything. Doesn't change who they are. And that's why I'm not out to my parents, is because I can't figure out a good way to do that and maintain whatever relationship we still have left.
And sometimes it works in the other direction as well. Like your relationship is more important to you with them, is more important to you than this one aspect of your life. So it cuts both ways in that sense. But it's a very prudent strategy. And all new atheists, I always advise them, be very careful. Because sometimes we live in a very privileged situation where we are financially independent, where we have a roof over our heads. You find a lot of young people who are still, to a certain degree, dependent on family for support and things, and they get a whiff of atheism and something changes in them, and they become these outspoken people who want to go and debate Aunt Carol. You tell Aunt Carol that she's a fool for going to church, and then they get kicked out on their asses.
It's not worth it.
You have to temper your enthusiasm with a healthy dose of reality, and sometimes these are not a hill that you would like to die on, because there are more important things in life.
I mean, if there was a good reason for me to go to a midnight mass with my parents one day, I would do it. It doesn't mean I've changed my beliefs, right? All it means is that I am respecting whatever that situation is. Now, I can't imagine one personally where I would actually do that, because I don't want to be up at midnight. I'm way too old for that stuff. But that's the second. We had a death in the family. I went to the church. I went to the service. I participated fully in that service, but it didn't change my beliefs any. But it helped. I hope it helped my presence being there. Help my cousins deal with that better than they would have had I not been there, and certainly help them deal with the death of their father. Much better than I would have if I'd gone in there and going, ranting and raving about being an atheist and how wrong they were to do all this stuff, right? That doesn't. You got to look at what the focus is, read the room and see where things are, and just not always be willing, like you said, to die on that hill. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you've just realized, had that epiphany that God doesn't really exist and that you're an atheist and you don't have a group to go with, there's nothing wrong with going to church and continuing that group and hanging out with those folks. They are still who they are. They're still your friends. If you're really upset about it, don't go to the church, but go to all the other surface, all the other things that are going on, all the community activities, until you build a more secular community activity. You know, whether that's bowling, and everybody makes fun of bowling, but, you know, bowling is a social activity.
Yeah.
Sports, you know, there are kickball leagues, there are board game leagues, scuba diving, skydiving, Jeep clubs. You have an interest somewhere on the internet, you're going to find the webpage of a local group, and there's your community already made that is highly unlikely to start talking about, in most cases, religion. And the more, like with scuba diving, that never comes up. We're always talking about the dives we've done, the dive we're doing, or the dive we're about to do, right? Those are the only three things we generally talk about. It's just not something
Well,
that comes
you're
up.
definitely not talking during the dive. I can guarantee you that.
Not well.
Sign language.
Sign language gets kind of interesting. You know, shark, lobster. Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of going on. With the board gaming group I was part of, there wasn't, you know, once you start getting into the game, there might be the occasional, dear Lord, let me roll a 6 or whatever type thing going on, but it's not proselytizing. It's not any of that other stuff, right? They're focused on whatever game they're playing. And so a lot of these hobby groups are that way. So you go find some that are more secular, dealing with just whatever the hobby is you want. And if you have 2 or 3 hobbies, then that's good too. Or if you don't have any, start building some, right? Finding some other things to do and finding other people to do it with is a great way to rebuild your community if you really don't want to go to the church to do that for those community activities. So that's something you can do. And I don't have a problem with people doing that. I mean, if you're in a low population area, like, you know, large parts of Alabama, maybe that is exactly what you have to do. You still have to go to keep that community, because you don't want to isolate yourself. That would be the worst thing to do.
And also, you know, we live in an age where, you know, we're sitting on 2 opposite sides of the planet and we're having a conversation. You know, you can also find your community online, you know, in the interim while you are, because there's no substitute for face-to-face, human-to-human contact. You know, like don't even tell me that you can substitute a virtual girlfriend for the real thing. You know, it's
right.
Let's not go there. You know, it's just not the same. So, and in the interim, what, you know, we also encourage a lot of our members. You know, it's like, you know, if you find yourself feeling isolated or not belonging, you know, get yourself connected to a virtual group. Like, we run a couple of Facebook groups here, and you know, we just create a space and a community for people to connect, to vent, to share ideas, to talk about X, Y, Z, and you know, take it from there. Because a lot of people find that aspect of stepping out of religion the biggest hurdle to cross, is that sense of community that you build, and it's actually a false sense of identity that religion prints in on you, because you start to see yourself as a believer of X religion first before you start to see yourself as your personal identity, where it's actually supposed to be the other way around. For example, I am Dean, I happen to believe in X, Y, Z. Well, you know, religion warps that the other way around, where it becomes such a part of your identity, your social circles, you know, all your friends are, and you know them from the church. And what it does is it isolates people. It creates this insular bubble where all your acquaintances, all your friends, everybody's in there. So the thought of stepping outside of that means that you're immediately going to lose those friends and those connections. And what does that teach us at the end of the day? That they were not really your friends to begin with.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
those people were acquaintances of convenience, which means you only, when it was convenient, they were acquainted to you. And it's actually very sick if you look, you know, if you look at it from an outside perspective. It's very sick, and it's very fake. And there's a whole shift in our human consciousness at the moment, where people in this virtual world, we gravitate towards authentic experiences. People want to see authenticity because we're bombarded with fake advertisements and movies and I think 24 hours a day. So when it comes to human interaction, people value authenticity and real interactions. And religion doesn't do that. It's like always, hello, Sarah. So glad to see you at church today. The Lord has been so good to me today. In the meantime, she's busy divorcing her husband, and children are all drug addicts. And it's crazy how that works. But
Jim, putting up that facade is never a good thing.
No, it's not. I'm in closing. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just want to talk about the positive aspects. Like what have you noticed any specific areas of growth in your life? Anything that now that you don't believe, that has changed for you radically? Like for example, we'll find people who used to be, for example, extremely bigoted. Like when they leave religion, they become connected to humanity and something changes. Has been any major paradigm shifts for you, that are remarkable since you've left religion?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot more comfortable with I don't know being the correct answer.
Yeah.
I have an engineering mindset. I like to know how right I am to the last decimal point. But we have to be able to say I don't know and be okay with that. What caused the big bang? I don't know. And
Nobody.
That's okay, right?
Yeah.
There are some things we may never know. There are some things we just don't know yet. And there are things we need to figure out. But we have to be comfortable with saying I don't know. And I think that's the biggest change, because that is, kind of a primary thing. But there's lots of things that happen after that. I can, I do know the science behind this, but if I didn't know the science behind LGBTQIA and I just said, I don't know why they're this way, right? What does that really change now? Well, now I can just accept, hey, they're making a claim. I don't know how to prove that claim true or false. Therefore, I'm going to accept them as they are. I don't have to accept the claim as true, but I can accept it how they are, support them as people, and treat them with people, and deal with them empathetically. I don't have to accept every claim as true or reject every claim. I can remain on the fence about it and deal with every human being as empathetically as possible, and go from there. I don't have to know all of those answers, right? And the other thing too is I'm much more comfortable finding the answer. Christianity gives you a lot of answers, right? I like to call
it, from asking the questions. That's what it does. It stops you from having curiosity. Because, we have all the answers for you. Why bother asking the questions? It's
right.
Sorry, I interrupted you. It's just
it's like they give you a recipe, right? And that recipe is great if you like vanilla, just plain white cake, right? But if you like some variety in your cake, if you want sometimes some angel food cake and sometimes some German dark chocolate, or you want coconut, or you want something different, it's a different recipe to do that. And the problem is that life isn't a cake. It's not open to recipes. You're not always going to get the same result from the same action unless you're doing something the laws of physics do, like dropping a pencil, something like that. But human interactions aren't that. Right? We have good days, we have bad days, we have fears, and we have things that have imprinted on us that cause us to react in certain ways because we are pattern recognition machines. And if it's a pattern that causes a negative reaction, we're going to get that. So deal with be comfortable with I don't know, especially when you don't. Be comfortable, which makes you become more comfortable in finding the answer out, or realizing that you don't really care. Philosophy says that there are three positions on any claim. You can accept it as true, you can reject it as false, or you can say, I don't know. I add a fourth one, and this is entirely me. I don't care. Right?
Where do I
Not
sign up to that church? Where do I sign up to the I don't care church? You know?
yeah, exactly. So do you, if somebody comes up to you and says they're gay, do you care? No. Now, do they
That's the,
do
that's the
things that
thing.
are sexually inappropriate towards you? That you care about. That's a whole different,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
doesn't
yeah, yeah.
matter if you're gay or not, right? That just matters this human being is just not acting correctly or crossing your
Exactly.
boundaries.
I always tell people, I always say to them, my sexual preferences becomes your business when I'm screwing you. And that's
Right.
the only time. It's like when I'm not screwing you, who I screw is none of your business. It's
Right.
why are you so obsessed with what people do with their genitals? Like leave people. If somebody wants to, have a romantic relationship with a towel, that's their business. It's not your business.
As long as everybody involved can consent.
As long as the towel consents. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, a towel isn't a person, right? A towel can't make a
I
decision.
guess. I
So
guess.
yeah. But yeah, as long as consent is there's consent from all parties involved. Have fun,
Yeah.
enjoy
Have fun.
yourself.
Knock
Don't feel
yourself
guilty
out.
about it in the morning. There's no such thing as a walk of shame.
Amazing, amazing. Jim, I really want to thank you for being so incredibly generous with your time, for meeting up with us here in the
Loved
southern
it.
tip of Africa. Keep doing what you're doing. You guys do amazing work there at the ACA. But the guys like us here, we literally standing on the shoulders of giants. You guys have done a lot of good work in this space, and more power to you. More power to you.
Well, thank
May
you for the kind words. And I stand on the shoulders of giants too, because there's a lot of people before me, and there'll be a lot of people after me. With any luck, there'll be people after me. But
yeah. And I might just add here that the atheist movement in the continent of Africa is growing. There are, we've connected with so many atheists in Africa, and religion it's going to take a bit longer here in Africa, but religion will eventually lose its foothold on the minds of people. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. It's not going to happen in your lifetime. But there is hope. The momentum that this whole movement is gaining is something that's giving me a lot of hope. And in closing, Jim, where can people find you on social media? If anybody wants to connect to you, what would be the best route for them to reach out?
Yeah, so I have my own YouTube channel. I don't do much with it. I am on Atheist Experience. I don't know off the top of my head when my next appearance is going to be, but it'll be some Sunday here soon. And you can also find me occasionally on the line and other places around as people invite me to come talk. More than happy to do that. So don't be afraid to reach out, mostly on Facebook. And if you are from Africa, please forgive the skepticism, but I get a lot of bad actors claiming to be from Africa. So that's always a problem. And so, yeah, but the hangout with Secular Kenyon, thanks. We appreciate that. That is kind of awesome. And it's amazing. I think one day we should do some statistics, but it's amazing how many people email us in and say, thank you for making me an atheist, and being that I don't think we recognize how often that happens enough, but the shows do work. So don't be afraid to spread them out. We very often we're not having a conversation with that theist to change that theist's mind. It's that person in the audience, and we know it works. The Hangout with Secular Kenyon is an example. Objectively, Dan of Truth Wanted is another example. There are dozens and dozens and dozens, and there's hundreds, maybe thousands, definitely thousands at this point, of examples of exactly that happening. So share this stuff. It does help get as many people, because again, it's not the person you share this to that you're going to change their mind of. Maybe somebody else they share it with, or somebody else who sees it. So encourage as many eyeballs as possible to get on all the content. It's not going to be one piece of content that does the job. It's going to be all of them.
Yeah. Amazing. Take care, Jim. Have a great rest of your day. And if ever you need if you ever need to connect to anybody in Africa, I'm not saying we are very well connected, but we can most probably point you in the right direction. Yeah, please feel free to reach out to us. We're a community of about 1,000 atheists here who have mobilized under this atheist public umbrella. So, we sure to find some connection or find some way of making it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you.